Hello everybody and welcome back to week 4 of Hearthstone Global Games. Got off to a pretty long start there. We've still got 5 more matches for you today, so stay tuned for all of that. Sodal, how are you doing after that long one?
Yeah, doing fantastic. I mean, honestly, keep them coming. I'm not going to be the man to complain about sitting here and casting games of Hearthstone.
Exactly.
Not like it's a real hard job. I'm happy here to sit here and do it all day. So if the series want to go as long as that, that is just more Hearthstone for me to sit and enjoy.
And this could be a long one as well, because both of these teams, everybody's trying to win, but it's all on the line for France and Kazakhstan here, because they haven't won a match between them yet.
Yes, and that's definitely not a spot, it goes without saying, that either of them will want to be in. And they've definitely wouldn't be 2 teams that you'd peg as, teams that would be struggling early on. You know, Kazakhstan, sure, they're not going to be like a massive powerhouse with the average team combined, but because this is a cooperative tournament, purely just having Neyman on your team means that he can raise the level of everyone else. He has input on every game that happens through communication, whether he's the pilot or not. So you would think that that alone, with the pedigree that we've seen from Neyman, would be enough to really make Kazakhstan a force to be reckoned with. And France, on the other hand, they are just one of the most close-knit communities anywhere in the world. The French scene is phenomenal. You know, Talk, who you see in our intro video, our boy band audition video as the lead into Global Games, he came out as a member of the French community. We were filming it in France, and just when I was looking at him, finding out about him after meeting him, his amount of YouTube subscribers and Twitter followers, etc., it's astronomical. He's a huge deal in the French community, and all of these other guys circling around him are just much the same thing. The French community really just does have its own stories to tell.
Yeah, and this team is probably better than most people will give it credit for as well. Demon going 18-6 in combined playoffs and preliminaries in the last 4 attempts.
I believe at one point, and I will say that I only know this through because of Neil's big book of stats that I occasionally borrow things from, that Demon at one point, I don't know if it's currently the case, had the most wins in preliminary and playoff events at ADC.
May still be the case. He's definitely right up there with 18 wins. I know Like a Boss has a load of, well, I might check
Show was up there for a while as well.
Yeah, then his alarm clock didn't go off.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, Show. Rip. But yeah, Unid have got top 4 DreamHack Winter, and Talk was top 4 DreamHack Valencia in 2014.
Yes.
So he's been playing for a little while, and Best Man Mark has just been playing all kinds of stuff forever. And a very popular player indeed in France.
I had a timer on it. The first iteration of the words stuff or things took around 1 minute and 45 seconds.
The first of many.
Yes, there you go.
So yeah, this is going to be an interesting match to see how these line up. And Kazakhstan aren't just complete nothing. I mean, apart from Neyman, their team is pretty experienced, as we went through last time as well. Hallmark in particular, I believe, has played WSG for his country.
Yes.
He won the Kazakhstan qualifiers for that. So the players pretty strong in these 2 teams.
Yeah, exactly. Hallmark has had 1 or 2 Hallmark moments in his career, but it is generally Neyman who is the man who is probably the lone superstar of the Kazakhstan team, the one man that certainly the casual onlooker will have heard of due to his HCT performances, etc.
Okay, I believe we're just going to take a moment to set up the game, so we'll be right back very soon. Hello again, welcome back to week 4. Thanks for hanging on in there. Yeah. We sorted out a thing or 2, and now we should be ready to go soon into France versus Kazakhstan. Sotul, where were we?
We were just talking about Kazakhstan. We just wrapped up the players, the lineup. Mentioned that France, of course, very, very tight-knit community. They don't get a massive amount of exposure to the greater world because they don't have a big English language streamer. They don't go out to a huge amount of majors around the world. They generally, a lot of them just stream on the same one Twitch channel that's just basically broadcasting French language Hearthstone 24/7, 365. But that particular channel is just a huge presence within the Twitch community when it comes to Hearthstone. And I was talking about the influence that some of the Twitch celebrities and the YouTube celebrities of the French Hearthstone scene do have, and it's some very impressive numbers that they are putting up. So they are, a real global juggernaut in terms of the Hearthstone scene.
Yeah, and again, we went through the 4 players, but they are 4 players who would be expecting to do well as we go to yet more beautiful views of countries that aren't the UK.
Yeah, Funny how that works out, but yeah. France, very, very, very pretty little country, only a stone's throw away on the other side of the English Channel, as it is named. I'm not sure if French people call it that, but there you go. Kazakhstan, on the other hand, first time I saw these shots, was just a little bit surprised at how beautiful and modern and shiny everything was looking. It's not quite the memey impression that we have got of our one exposure as ignorant Englishmen to Kazakhstan.
The one that Neyman specifically says we must not mention Borat about.
Yes, well, you just did. I skirted around it.
I didn't say a word.
You definitely did exactly say that word that I'm not going to repeat, even to make the point that you said it.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
I believe you. Okay, so we're going to have a look at the lineups in a moment. Here we go. And both teams putting Warrior at the top of the list alongside Druid for Neyman, and Best Marmot has gone for the Hunter.
So it's very possible that we do lead out with a Warrior mirror here on game 1 between France and Kazakhstan, which, if you are keeping count, a Warrior mirror would have 6 R's in it, Lorinda.
Awesome. I have noticed that before.
I'm sorry.
So that's absolutely fine. I did mention that Quest Warrior mirrors are both my least favourite matchup and my least favourite phrase. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you can go with that if you wish.
And honestly,
I owe you one now.
Jokes aside, I think it might happen because I don't think anyone is going to want to pick Hunter into the potential Quest Warrior mirror. So yeah, that's what is going to happen. And I would imagine this means it's Quest from both sides as well, because if one of them was a pirate, you probably wouldn't want to be queuing up the pirate, again, with the risk of just hitting the Quest Warrior on the other side.
Interesting that Kazakhstan leading out strong there with Druid or Warrior as their picks. So they really wanted to get this first point on the board, and sort of to hell with the fact that it actually gives up quite a lot of value later in the match when the other teams know they haven't got to play either of these two classes.
Mm-hmm. And you can see, kind of the respect given to Neyman. We definitely don't want to sell the rest of the team short, but obviously Neyman is the player that has just proven the point already. Hearthstone Global Games is an opportunity for other players and other countries to make that point. Neyman has done the work already, and you can see he's coming up first to start the series off on a strong footing, and he's also being trusted with the ace match if it comes down to that.
And the French, there's at least 2 in the same room there ready to play this, as Neyman appears to be on his own, but again, as we emphasise every single time, all of these teams are in communication. There are 4 on each side able to input into the communication.
Yeah, and Warrior Mirror, we really heavily sold it early on, as we just quickly, let's go and look over the 2 players. Neyman, as we mentioned, does have the competitive pedigree behind him. HCT Winter Champion, and made it all the way to the 2016 Hearthstone World Championship. 6 top 8 finishes, and of course that major organization pickup, Virtus Pro, which really was founded off that success at the 2016 Winter Championship, because the founder members were all basically cherry-picked from a friendship that they made up after qualifying for that event.
It says there about Best Marmot. He's the plays for Armour team. He's actually the head of Hearthstone for that team. So he's actually the team leader there. That's one of the really good teams. It says World Champion Pavel on that team. I think that has changed very, very recently.
Yes, it has.
Since TJ actually did these huge amount of notes that he publishes for us.
Yes, indeed, but still a very accomplished player in his own right. And of course, loves France because he thinks it has the best wines and cheeses in the world. I would concur on the wine. I'm actually not a big fan of French cheese, personally. So
we will see later on with some of the deck lists, no doubt.
There you go. And then we'll see if they are looking to cheese Kazakhstan out of this matchup. But Neyman is, of course, going to have something to say about that. And as I was mentioning before about the Quest Warrior, before we started talking about the 2 players, the mirror, we very heavily sold early on that it was just game over if you got Quest first.
Right.
Reynad, of course, who is allowed to break the fundamental laws of Hearthstone because he is, of course, the creator and he can manipulate the forces of nature at will, proved that isn't 100% the case during his DreamHack Austin run, as he was able to put together a couple of come-from-behind victories in that mirror match. Still, I stand by the fact that rush Quest and equip it as quickly as you possibly can is the go-to strategy in the matchup.
And we did see yesterday, actually, one of the teams getting miles behind, maybe 4 points behind on the Quest. And by the end of the game, they were only like 1 or 2 turns back.
There was one turn in it. There was literally 1 turn in it, and they were at 1.4 taunts behind on the counter.
So there's definitely counterplay to some degree, but I think we'll still see our first share of early dirty rats should the opportunity arise.
Yep. We live for better or worse in a meta where never mind, throw all of that out the window. It's a Pirate Warrior. Actually, Honestly, we probably should have considered this with a little bit more seriousness than we perhaps did, because Neyman, of course, is notorious as one of the real power aggro players in Hearthstone history. He was not one of the originators of Face Hunter, you know, your Chuckies and Blackouts and Green Sheeps, etc., that really started to put that build together, but Neyman was one of the people that mastered it. Top 10 legend at will, on demand, any time of day, he would just get there with Face Hunter.
Going to be interesting to see how he gets there with this, though, because the French have gone for the Armorsmith build of the Quest Warrior, which is the more accepted build now, and we've been talking about that maybe that will start to fade out soon.
And here's the slight advantage that you do get. That quest will be kept, which we know is wrong if you know that you're coming up against Pirate Warrior.
Yep.
However, on weight of balance, if it is Pirate Warrior that you're up against, you can keep the quest and still win. That's doable. If you queue into the mirror and you throw the quest away, you are donezo. So you have to keep it.
He got the double whammy as well with the Armorsmith being thrown away there, which would be also... Turns out that one attack minions are pretty good against one health minions, especially when they gain you armor each time they kill something. So at least winning the mind games there, Neyman, but the problem is that you have to.
Yes.
It means that the French team have got they've still got the better chance of winning, they've still got the better deck, and they can afford to make what looks like a mistake in the mulligan, but is actually just playing in numbers.
Yep. Fire Plume's heart is going to come down. There is the quick nod and blink of acknowledgement from Neyman. I think this was expected. And now, with how slow this hand has turned out to be from France, who really did go perhaps a little bit too all-in on the mirror match read than they had to. Of course, keeping Quest for the reasons I explained you have to do, but sending the Armorsmith away as well seemed like a good insurance policy that they could have held on to. But that Ravaging Ghoul pickup now is a very big deal, because the fear of a 3-drop coming down here, if it's specifically South Sea Captain, could be such an enormous blowout for them. If they hold on to it for a little bit longer, there is the option to pair it together with Sleep with the Fishes, and I think you just saw from the mouse actions there that they just considered that exact option, but I think they are well aware of how much damage a South Sea Captain would do to them in this position.
Yeah, I mean, if they wait for the Sleep with the Fishes here, I think this game would be over pretty much before turn 4, except, you know, all bar the shouting at least, and even if it cleared up the board, I feel that the Warrior would just get enough direct damage to win the game. And they decide to agree with that, and they're just going to play the Ghoul, it looks like. Unless they're going to play Acolyte, that just doesn't make sense. No, they're going to play the Ghoul and start to tidy things up. Let's see how Cultist makes things interesting this turn.
It does. It's not quite there, and since you have N'Zot's first mate in hand, that combination is always, you know, it's safe. You can always rely on just N'Zot's first mate into Cultist, 2/4 weapon, fine, we can work with that. So buffing up to a 2/2 weapon right now doesn't really solve any issues with the Ravaging Ghoul. So I wonder whether we might see Fiery War Axe here, although it does make potentially future turns slightly inefficient, but it means if your Bloodsail Raider sticks around, you get a Cultist buff on the War Axe, which is of course higher value, and then you're in the meantime building your board state with Pirates so you can get more immediate value out of South Sea Captain in the future.
Yeah, it seems that protecting your Bloodsail to let the Captain do some work makes a lot of sense here to Fire War Axe down the Ghoul. Obviously there are multiple ways to kill an injured pirate. Sounds like something out of a book, but yeah, multiple ways to kill an injured pirate, and this means that the Bloodsail Raider will be struggling to survive a lot of the time here, but actually looking all right.
Yeah, I like this actually in the end. Playing the N'Zot's first mate as well, literally just as a 1-mana 1/1 here, which does give away a little bit of a signal that they are looking to leverage pirate presence on the board, that, you know, Bloodsail Cultist or South Sea Captain will both be in France's mind right now. Spoilers, there are both, but, you know, there is little reason to just this aggressively get a 1/1 on the board, unless you are looking to really pack some punch with some pirate snowball in the future.
France's decisions here are all pretty inefficient, and a lot of them end with just armoring up, which is not where they want to be. Battle Rage, of course, more of a mid-game to late-game card draw engine, which is going to be no use in this particular matchup, especially when Curator does that job just so much better. Sleep with the Fishes would be wasteful. They've got to start counting exactly how much they're willing to take, though, before pressing the panic button. And there doesn't seem to be any efficient play here.
Yeah, the Whirlwind to go along with that Sleep with the Fishes now is a fantastic panic button at some point, so I think they can afford to be very, very greedy with their health total at this point. I think developing the Acolyte here just to draw some cards actually works out very nicely for them because, as I said, it doesn't matter to them what the next minion is. If it's South Sea Captain, if it's Bloodsail Cultist, if it's Frothing Berserker, they kill all of it with Whirlwind Sleep with the Fishes, so they know they have that panic button to clear the board at any given time. What they need is follow-up to that. They need an Ali Armorsmith, a Bloodhoof Brave, to be able to drop on the turn after and start really walling Kazakhstan out of this game.
Yeah, it's going to work out really well for them. Just want to pick up there on what Neyman just did. You said last turn that it was a fairly strong read that Captain or Cultist is already in hand.
Yes.
He just played the top deck Cultist.
Interesting. Okay, I didn't catch that.
So that sort of doesn't help get rid of your opponent's read, and he should know really that that read's been given out. I know it's only a small minor point, but we're playing 4 really good players versus 4 really good players. Minor points might get spotted.
Yeah, there are other reasons why that 1-1 on the board would be somewhat useful. For example, it was played going into the Warrior turn 3, so if Stonehill Defender were to come down, the 1-1 plus the weapon would be the 4 that you would need for the Bloodsail Raider then to be able to connect to face. So maybe, Neyman is just saying, hey, I don't think that read is too much of a telegraph, or perhaps it just wasn't even a consideration. The team talk was just Cultist, Cultist, all right, let's go.
And it's fairly obvious you play the first mate before you play the War Axe if you need to develop that. So maybe he's feeling he's given a read that there's another War Axe in his hand because that needed to be played immediately. So definitely not a clear-cut read as we sometimes make out where we can see everything, but certainly something that I'm just not in favour in general of playing the right-hand card unless there's a good bluff reason to do so.
I agree. I think there are definitely situations where it can be correct, but in general, I think it's something that you do need to be a little bit careful about. Leroy being picked up is damage that you can force through now before the big taunt train starts to come down, but honestly, all of the damage, bar Mortal Strike, in your deck is damage that you have to force through before the big taunt wall comes down. So it's not even really that big a deal to kind of ration it out like that, because there are going to be taunts on the board for the majority of the game if the Warrior game plan can come into effect. So it's just a matter of mana efficiency more than anything, because there just isn't a good turn otherwise. Like Leroy face and pass, then on the next turn at least you can just upgrade your weapon again.
You want these 2 pirates to survive as well. You don't want to throw one out there and risk it getting killed by an opposing War Axe. So, and if you're not going to play one of the pirates, you might as well just stick the Leroy down and get that 6 in there, I think.
I think so too. It's not pretty by any means, but at some point this Leroy is going to have to connect to face. It's just a matter of whether you feel like you need it to take care of a taunt minion is the concern. Like it does hit a Bloodhoof Brave perfectly, it does hit the Curator perfectly. So it looks like Kazakhstan has diverted here and just say, oh wow, look at the celebration from Talk in the background of that War Axe draw. War Axe for the Captain curves perfectly now with either of the 3 mana taunts, but yeah, Neyman's decision here just to try and hold on to that Leroy, potentially even as removal for a taunt minion. We'll see how that pans out for him, because that War Axe is going to be a big punish potentially to his ability to upgrade the Fiery War Axe again with that second Bloodsail Cultist.
Again, this is a deck that you have to think a lot about the future turns. Though, how many pirates, Neyman will have in his mind, how many pirates can I steal top deck to activate this Cultist? Answer, he'll know the exact answer. I know the answer is a lot.
Yes.
There's definitely more pirates in this pirate deck. So that may have factored into his considerations, not just what he's got in his hand now, but what he's likely to have in his hand like this next turn. That's going to be well calculated or well fortunate, whichever way you want to look at it, because that's now going to be able to get through this Tar Warrior. Tar Creeper.
You just wanted to say the word warrior extra times, didn't you?
I know that chat love it when I say that word.
Out what they want.
I'm here to give people what they want, not what they deserve.
There you go. Primordial Drake pickup. If we can now find our way to turn 8, if you are a France supporter, then that card can single-handedly be a lockout for aggressive decks, but they are still a couple of turns away, and nothing looking overly promising. We're looking potentially for just another cheap taunt that they can drop this turn, and those are not the options that they need. Although with Dread Corsair, with the War Axe still equipped, is actually exactly what they can potentially need. That is
absolutely beautiful.
1 mana and even fits in the hero power as well.
It seems like we're talking about how good Primordial Drake is every single match at the moment. Just with the Curator curving into, I know it's drawn in the hand now, but I think we're going to be seeing rather a lot of this card over the coming days and weeks.
Card is bananas.
Surprised it took so long for us to be raving about it. I know everyone's been playing it.
Did it?
It was good. Yeah, longer than I think it should have.
Okay.
So I blame you.
Fair, fine.
Okay, so 7 mana. 7 mana's worth of stuff to do. Can he make that actually work for him, though? Can he make these cards sing?
Well, again, we saw a particular indicator on the 5-mana turn when he didn't just Leroy face that he is very, very considerate of the ability of this Leroy just to take out a taunt minion from hand and push damage through of existing minions. So whether we will see the Leroy played this turn, I'm not sure. He can, of course, there's a rare opportunity for a Leroy value trade on the board right now if he wants that to happen, but even then it's a little bit awkward.
So the whole game, in his mind at this point, probably relies on how he feels this Raider is best protected.
Yes.
If he can make this 7-3 live for a turn or two, he will feel he can win the game. If he can't, then he'll feel he'll lose the game. Because that's a lot of damage, and he's out of things to do.
But I think, you know, when you're well aware of the possibility of the on-curve taunt minion, you know, this is, you know, very much a kind of building blocks deck coming down from the opponent. You know, what's the taunt minion they want to play on turn 7? It's Curator. Well, in that case, I'd quite like to just smash into the Curator for 6 damage and have these minions push face. And
that's exactly what is going to happen unless something... You can't. There's not even a soul read available here. There's nothing worth doing other than playing the Curator. Okay, so there is. You can play Armorsmith, Battle Rage, and Hero Power. That doesn't look good at all.
It's honestly, over the next couple of turns, looking totally fine for France in this spot, though. Is there a lethal draw for Kazakhstan? Upgrade is not going to do it here. And yes, they can push up to 11 in this spot. But then there's going to be the 1/1s on the board from Leroy, or at least one of the 1/1s if he chooses to trade one of them down with the upgrade weapon, which means that 1/1/1 goes into the 7-3, and then Primordial Drake hits the board, and that is just going to be game over. Remember, though, that Kazakhstan can plan for that with perfect information. They 100% know there is a Primordial Drake in hand right now.
And Neyman will have to consider trading into the other 1/1 with his 3/1.
That is the consideration.
Yeah, it's not
It's ugly as hell. But that is what you're going to have to do to have any kind of chance against Primordial Drake.
You can also weigh up whether you think they've got it. Well, you know they have, because Curator doesn't not pull Primordial Drake. It's the only dragon in the deck. And
the only way it doesn't is if they're both in your hand already. So that card is there.
And then there's the Mortal Strike out. So he can't play Primordial Drake if he's on 4. He can, and he probably will.
Yeah.
But you've got outs if you're Neyman, if your opponent doesn't get to do that armor up.
Slam. Does that now allow him to slam, play a taunt, and armor up? Not quite. Slam plus Armorsmith. No, that doesn't quite get in there either. But the slam.
No, just slam, trade.
Yeah, slam, trade is fine. But I'm just thinking, you know, you were just saying Primordial Drake isn't perfect because it still leaves you vulnerable to Mortal Strike. Whereas slam, trade the board, press the armor button, and drop a taunt as well will be the most secure play that you can do.
Drop Armorsmith,
but that's not quite possible.
Armorsmith, trade gains you the 2 extra armor.
Exactly.
You get to Battle Rage. Just into some more stuff, and any sort of ally Armorsmith at this point would just end the game immediately.
Right, Armorsmith would get you out of range of just 1 card from hand killing you, but since there wouldn't be a taunt minion coming down, it would allow a weapon to just hit you in the face again, and then maybe another draw would be worth
Unless
it.
you drew another taunt.
Absolutely perfect.
On curve.
Yeah. That should more or less be game. And you just saw Torque celebrating as well in the background. I think he feels exactly the same way. That probably has just now locked it up for France.
Yeah, just need a double strike in consecutive turns there. Was pretty much the only chance there, I think, now for Kazakhstan.
And it had to start. It had to start there, right?
Yeah.
Like 2 strikes consecutive from here is actually not even going to be good.
Yeah,
enough.
it would need to go 4-4 the last 2 turns. I guess Arcanite Reaper sets up some situations if you're on Kazakhstan's side and can't see the Primordials, where that could still work.
They're there though. You 100% know they're there because Curator got played. So
yeah. And Neyman usually I've seen Neyman do this a lot of times. He'll play 1 or 2 extra turns because he wants to make sure he doesn't do anything silly, but he will give it up as well if needed and move on to the next game. That's been the thing that when he's absolutely sure, he just gives it up. So he can still see something, or he's not 100% sure he hasn't missed anything. And why would you give it up? I mean, draw the cards, see what it is.
Right, you've got a whole team, a whole country backing you, and you also just potentially get to see more cards from your opponent. Even if they don't play them, that's more cards that appear on stream that you can then go back and watch the VOD. That helps your research for the coming weeks. You're gaining more information about things that teams play, unless you have to play them in a later stage when you're rematched.
Exactly.
So there's all sorts of reasons to keep playing, and when you have the weight of 3 other players lying on your back and the weight of a whole country of Hearthstone fans rooting you on, I don't think you'll be seeing too many concedes until it is well and truly over like it was right there.
Yeah, Primordial's
a happy boy.
Sealing the deal in so many ways, and yeah, Talk's just got so much energy, absolutely loving this. And that's what it's all about, really, is the competition with the fun side added in. That's the mix of people who enjoy Hearthstone and people who like to win, and some of them are actually the same. You're not.
I mean, I am. I enjoy Hearthstone because I enjoy winning at Hearthstone. They are one and the same thing.
There you go, then.
Yeah. Winning is just fun. People will learn this one day.
I'll try it sometime.
You can just see the difference in demeanor between the losing Naaman and the happy, jubilant Best Mama and Talk, that clearly winning is indeed very fun.
Yeah, it looked fun, I must admit. What also is fun is that Raven is not here for Hunter getting its second outing of the day.
Hunter against Mage as well. This is literally Raven's dream matchup, but I am glad that we will potentially get through a Discover Mage matchup without me having to hear about every primordial glyph having a pyroblast in it.
Because it doesn't.
It just doesn't.
Ever.
It's just not how it works.
You'll get the exact opposite spectrum of it this time around, where basically just nothing ever comes from the glyph apart from other glyphs.
So yeah, Hunter coming up against Mage. Of course, there is a great opportunity for Hunter to do very well in this matchup. There are multiple avenues that it can take to be able to do that as well. If it's a one-drop heavy list that's looking to leverage Direwolf Alpha, Crackling Razormaw and Scavenging Hyena and is playing enough one-drops to support that strategy. And then if you're playing a slower mid-range deck, there's always the nod that says, hey, Mage is one of the most popular decks in the game right now, and I have the ability as Hunter to play a card that isn't quite as bad as Eater of Secrets to be able to deal with this problem.
You're such a fan of Eater of Secrets.
It's a terrible card. It's awful.
But the Discover Mage deck is one of the reasons that I played a lot of Hunter last season on Legend and on Ladder, and I did pretty well with it, just because this Mage deck cannot defend itself against the onslaught that a Hunter can throw at it very easily. Occasionally it just stabilizes early with a lot of Medivh's Valets, that sort of thing, shooting your minions down whilst gaining some tempo, but if it doesn't get that early tempo, the Hunter just steamrolls it.
Boiled noodles and meat in spiced onion sauce. Yep, sign me up. I'm moving to Kazakhstan. That sounds delicious. Thank you very much, Deathcat.
Done.
Yep.
See you.
All right, bye. Enjoy the solo cast.
Meanwhile, again, Diz Demon, we mentioned the 18-6 record in preliminaries and playoffs. Of course, that did accumulate him in reaching the Summer Championships last time around. And a very, very accomplished player that I don't think many people know much about, and that's a shame. So hopefully he gets a chance to shine here at the Global Games.
Yeah, it was very surprising to me. I've actually sat there in the studio casting the playoffs and preliminary events, and when you told me the statistic about how Diz Demon was tied for the most wins or had the most wins at the time, 18 total wins in prelim and playoff events, I was surprised. And I'd actually been there covering, must have said his name 5 or 6 times as we were recapping scores and events that were happening around the world. So, if I'm that close to it and I didn't quite appreciate how well he was doing, what chance did the rest of you guys have?
Exactly. Just popped out at the top of the sheet. I'm like, this guy, I've seen his name a few times because obviously I've done quite a lot of work on it, but I was surprised as well, and it's really good to see him finally doing well in things, and hopefully he'll continue to do well here. Although I don't like to say that because that means someone else has got to lose. I don't like having to cheer teams to lose. I like to cheer both teams to win. Someone
always has to lose. It's the spirit of competition, Lorinda, but yes.
I thought that's why we should all cheer for Thailand, right?
That's fair, yeah. Lorinda, of course, is an inclusive caster who wants everyone to be victorious. Participation medals all around, but there is going to be a winner and loser in this series, and France are off to a great start, even with that very, very greedy mulligan. It kind of echoes the point that I made originally, right? Is like you mulligan for Quest Warrior because you beat Pirate Warrior anyway, right? Like, they gave themselves even more chance than I was suggesting, but they hammered the point home in the end by getting there by the skin of their teeth. But now it's going to be Mage versus Hunter, and Diz Demon as well, piloting the Mage. We saw on that fact sheet has been nominated as the captain, and I think that is quite a testament to the fact that he has the best competitive pedigree on this team out of anyone, right? Because there are, as we mentioned, some prominent French community figures,
experience
content
as well,
creators.
Sometimes goes towards being captain, and obviously they've said, well, you've played the most seriously important matches, even though we may have more experience than you across the years. And yeah, being voted onto the captain there is fantastic for him.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's various titles that are given to members of teams. There's an anchor and a captain, and there's various roles. The anchor,
he's all of them.
The anchor is the player that qualifies by right, which is of course also Diz Demon, but isn't by default given the position of captain. That is nominated between the team. Diz Demon was given that honor anyway, and yes, we do now get confirmation that this is going to be the Discover Mage from Diz Demon going up against what looks like a fairly slow Hunter list. Hunter and slow don't really go together too well, but in comparison to some of the lists you see that are 30 to 40% one drops and just really trying to leverage that position, the Tundra Rhinos and Hound Masters, etc., are a little on the slow side, but still will be looking to build a board early and leverage it as fast as he can.
Yeah, there's Face Hunter and there's Synergy Hunter at the moment. There's the Hunter that just slaps you about, which is the one drops you alluded to, and then there's this version which actually uses the fact that most of your cards are naturally beasts. It's not like maybe a year ago where you'd build a Beast Hunter deck specifically just because of the synergy. The good cards are now all beasts, so you can use that synergy to your advantage.
So, Scavenging Hyena and a Dream right now in hand for Smirta Cultic, and if nothing else appears as a potential plan for him, he will be looking to turn that Hyena into a Death Cat as soon as he possibly can.
See what you did there? You may want to explain that to people who haven't watched much Kazakhstan, because this guy has the best name in the tournament.
It was on the player fact sheet. Smirta Cultic translate quite literally to Death Cat in the native language, so.
And that is exactly what Savannah Highmane is in this matchup.
It's what a lot of cards in Hunter are. There's Alley Cat, which is the Death Cat as opposed to the Cute Cat, and then there's Scavenging Hyena, which can grow into a Death Cat, and there's Savannah Highmane, which is just naturally a Death Cat.
Has always been and always will be a Death Cat.
Or if you're playing against Priest, it would be a Shadower Death Cat.
I'm done. I'm so done. Anyway.
Thank you guys, I'll be here all night.
Will you?
No.
Oh.
I've already been hooked off to the side just because of how terrible that joke was.
The Ooze is going to be a big deal here, by the way, for France. The combination, as we know, of the armor and killing the weapon can be backbreaking. Not really for this particular matchup, but as it happens, it's going to allow a massive tempo swing.
Yeah, especially because Coin Eaglehorn Bow is not looking like the worst player in the world right
exactly.
now.
Like Killer 2-3. What have I got that does that? Oh.
Yeah.
And what have I got that doesn't do that I actually want to play this turn? You could play the Alley Cat, I guess.
It actually looks really promising because Coin Eaglehorn Bow kills this minion, it likely kills the next minion as well, and then you have a free turn to develop Alley Cat Scavenging Hyena, which creates a really awkward board position for the opponent. So Coin Eaglehorn Bow just looks like the best play here, and it's one of those positions where the best play is going to get punished incredibly hard.
Interesting to discuss the Ooze. This was a card, I think, in the first 10 days to 2 weeks of the expansion. Like, when the card was revealed, everyone went, yay, bye-bye Pirates. And then after that, people were saying, well, this card actually isn't very good. And suddenly it's a staple in Druid, it's a staple in Mage. We see it hanging around in other decks from time to time. So what's caused that change in feeling towards how the Ooze works?
There's a certain disco-loving magi named Medivh, Lorinda, which kind of demands that you play some weapon destruction in your deck. Harrison is a bit slow. Gluttonous Ooze is basically just the best hedge that says, hey, I need to deal with Atiesh. That needs to happen. That card will beat me in a lot of matchups, and you just brought it up specifically, Druid. Right. The one way Jade Druid is going to lose that matchup is to Atiesh value, just building a board state that they can't deal with. While they meteor 3 of your Jades, then suddenly they just get a 6-drop on the board as well, and you're in trouble. So Druid is one of the classes that needs it, but while you're focusing on Atiesh, you also do need to hedge, because Pirates are always the most prominent punish available. If you get too greedy with your tech decisions, Pirates will mess you up for it. So you need to make sure that your choice of tech decisions don't cost you too much in that matchup, which is why we're seeing Gluttonous Ooze and not Harrison.
So 3-3 for 3 is not a disaster. It's not fun, it's not great, it's a pretty low stat line, but it's good enough if things don't go your way.
But it also heals you against Pirate Warrior.
Sure, against Pirates in particular, sure, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
But tech cards are always a contentious issue, and I always find it interesting to discuss them, because obviously there are players out there who in general don't like tech cards at all, even in tournaments. Yeah, I was thinking Crane, but he played one last time out.
He did, that's true.
Which was really hilarious.
Heathen!
Yeah, hypocrite and heathen.
He's ignored the teachings of his own Book of Crane.
Yeah, anyway, ignoring the Book of Crane temporarily. Yeah, but playing tech cards also, obviously against the games where they don't get to use their tech abilities, are usually pretty bad.
Well, is it Death Cat time? It looks like it's death cap time.
Yeah. And how many alley cats do you play here? Do you just play them both? There aren't that many ways in this mage deck of clearing a board until turn 6 or 7.
It's true, and these turns, actually turn 5 to turn 6, are the turns where you have to punish Discover Mage. If you're looking for like your route to victory, if you're struggling to deal with this deck, these are the turns where you really turn the screw, right? Because if you're playing against Freeze Mage, there's still this kind of holdout where, if anything, turn 5, turn 6 are actually turns that you hold back psychologically, right?
And
Frost Nova, Doomsayer, Blizzard, these are things that concern you. So you try and create the balance between pressure and resources and how much you want to commit. These exact same turns are the turns where Discover Mage struggles, because those options are classically not included in the deck anymore. So these are the turns where you really have to push as hard as you possibly can.
And you can see exactly the result of that here, where just nothing here is fun. Okay, it's only going to be 4 cats as it happens, but France have had to mess around this turn to get rid of a 2-drop.
Yep, and now there is at least a board position to be leveraged here. It's not pretty. I mean, the 4 cats between them barely even contest the 2-3 that's in play, but most importantly, they do get to start pushing through some damage, and I imagine they will here because, again, it's still one of the awkward turns. It's still turn 6. Yep. It's still a turn where you can get away with exactly this sort of thing.
And if there's been a glyph cast, you just have to sort of use feel, right? You have to see, well, take my chances. Can I beat the Blizzard anyway?
Right.
And if you can, then sure. But if you can't, you still have to just make these plays. Mana Worm. This is one of the downsides of Mana Worm sometimes.
Is that you draw it on other turns that aren't one?
Is that some people draw on other turns that aren't one, apparently, yeah.
What to do?
There you go. I just was raving for a second for you there, just to make you feel at home.
Thanks. I miss him already.
Oh, I'm sure you'll get another chance to speak to him later.
It's still something to do this turn, because the rest of the hand just isn't very promising. You know, Fireball, what's really the target on this board? You can use it to potentially telegraph your Flame Strike for next turn if you want to break open the Wolf and take some extra damage. But Mana Worm at least is something that is vaguely competitive with this board, although it does immediately get devoured by the Infested Wolf. So this entire hand is just looking a touch awkward, and it's a hand that basically says to you, all right, we need to survive for a turn or two, and then we have a very clear game plan.
Yeah, 16 damage and Alex Strauss in your hand. Seems like a very clear game plan indeed. And they do actually go with the Flame Strike Telegraph, if you like, which is going to allow this high main to come down onto a board.
I don't mind this, honestly. I think France have probably said to themselves here, like, okay, we can telegraph Flame Strike here. What's the one thing that really stops us from Flame Striking? Well, it's a Savannah High Main on curve. High Main's probably just too slow in this matchup now. Like, if High Main comes down, there's not really that much damage being pushed, and France themselves are only a couple of turns away from being able to force through a checkmate victory here with the Ice Block still up and the Alex Strauss are coming down.
Yeah, we've been saying how this doesn't play like Freeze Mage for most of this particular game. This particular game, it does play like Freeze Mage.
Yes.
This is going to be the old school Alex you in the face. I don't think Kazakhstan can play around that, though. That is route 2 to victory for this deck a lot of the time, for the Mage deck. I feel it's the one that you have to hope they don't have, because it's not focused on doing this.
The Alex Strauss are into 15 plan?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I think the way that I look at this deck is that if you look at pre-rotation Freeze Mage, there was a lot of really heavy control matchups where they had the Evolved Kobold OTK strategy to be able to compensate for how stable some of the decks were in terms of healing, etc. This deck is a kind of response to that same thing, where, you know, Paladins started appearing with a lot of healing, Druids are around with the Quadra armor gain in the deck now alongside everything else, Warriors started to bring in the shield blocks and the armor smiths, etc. So there's no OTK plan available to Freeze Mage anymore, but then this deck kind of appeared and said, well, if we can't OTK people anymore, we can just build some board presence, we can play even more burn in the deck, and we can use Medivh to really have a late game push, and then that gives us a win condition against those other decks that we can't just do the Alex Strauss into 15 plan again.
Right, and if you need to, you can also do enough damage that they heal up, and then you can Alex Strauss into 15 on a turn a million, much, much later down the line.
Yeah.
But on this particular game, it is just going to be, well, it was going to be the basic version. Now they've used that Fireball, it's just going to put a little bit of a...
Oh, yeah, I mean, the Fireball was free to be used because you're playing against Hunter, right? So once Alex Strauss comes down, it's not like they have a clean way to deal with that.
Well, yes and no. I mean, we're playing in a tournament where we've seen a lot of weird things. There's Hunter's Mark, there's Deadly Shots can exist.
It's true.
So it's an assumption that they're playing a ladder-based deck.
It's true. No, it's a fair point. But still, when I made the point about, high main potentially being too slow, about them getting there, mentally it's because, that exact kind of turn could have happened. Just fireball the high main and then just push through or whatever. There's just not that much damage remaining on the board. So, there's still 2 or 3 turns left for France to pick up any other burn card to go along with the Alexstrasza plan, which would just be a straight-up guarantee for them, and that's only if Kazakhstan are able to deal with the 8/8 body afterwards.
Yeah, we're seeing now the power of that mana worm as well, like you say. Even though it's only a 1-drop on turn 8 or 7, it's still actually really irritating for the Hunter to deal with. Are they even going to choose to deal with it? Or are they just going to stick everything into the face and hope that France are out of things? That's exactly what they're going with, and that's going to result in a cleared board, and France going to be in a fantastic position on 17 health and nothing coming their way.
Yes, just steady a little bit. It looked like just for a second there was going to be a snap flame strike before the trade there, which obviously would have been a little bit inefficient, but the team caught it in the end. And that's 2 out of 2 Swamp King Dreads from Hunter decks that we've seen today.
I like this card.
Do you?
It deals with cards like Lyra. There's several cards.
If you can accurately predict the turn you want it to come down.
Right, I mean, it's not so important now as well, but it dealt with the mage deck that had it just made hundreds and hundreds of fireballs as well. You couldn't get your apprentice to stick on the board. Anything that's combo orientated, then the Swamp King Dread just stops them from being able to put that combo minion on the board.
Still not a fan. Yet to be convinced about the power of Swamp King Dread, but now look at the situation that France have set up for themselves. Alexstrasza are available to come down offensively, and the board in the meantime has been cleared by the Flame Strike, which means there isn't enough power in play to A, even threaten the ice block just yet, and B, deal with the 8/8 body.
Yeah, Dread's going to be a turn too slow here. And I think France will just... The Alexstrasza is just such a clean-looking play here that I don't see there's any other play. Obviously, they're going to take their time. There are other things they can do, but I think most of the time the slower looking turns, when they look obvious, are just teams double and triple checking, because why not?
Yeah, when you don't have 100% auto with Alexstrasza, it is a purely matchup defining decision to use it offensively. You basically completely limit your options against an aggressive deck when you choose to do the offensive Alexstrasza. So it makes sense to just really consider every possible option in this position. And yeah.
I've got an option for this one.
Yep, me too.
Hit him in the face! Which one do you use? Do you use the portal or the pyroblast?
He's going to try and tilt him with the babbling book here, try and find an answer out of here that will be lethal, and since that isn't there, he's just going to go ahead and do it with the Firelands portal instead.
Okay.
Yeah.
The thing is, when you try to tilt somebody that way and it doesn't come off, your opponents now are completely aware that you're desperate enough that you need to try to tilt.
Maybe he just wanted to see the Swamp King hit a 1/1. Maybe that was all it was.
Sure.
Yeah. Nonetheless, a clean victory for the Discover Mage, and it's getting harder and harder to really, be a denier of the force of this deck, because it's showing up time and time again in successful decks, both at DreamHack Austin in the past 2 or 3 weeks of this tournament, and it's performing with a massively high win rate, whereas it seems like every time we see Freeze Mage turn up, as much as some of us might want to still fly the Freeze Mage flag, and as well as George C did valiantly in his defeat, which, by the way, he may have lost, but that was one of the best played games of Hearthstone you will ever see, it still was not good enough. So, looks like
although
maybe...
that was against Druid.
It was, yes.
I'd like to see this same deck go up against Druid as well, because Druid destroys it as well.
Fair point.
And George C nearly made Freeze Mage beat that. I don't think he'd made this beat that.
All right, I take your point, but very close to taking the points right now is France up against Kazakhstan. Unid is going to have to come up now and try to close out a very quick 3-0 here. And it looks like we thought we might be seeing a quest mirror earlier, and we got debated by the Pirate Warrior, but now there is another potential quest mirror coming up with the Rogues.
And we haven't seen many of these recently. This was a matchup, I think, 3 weeks ago. We were terrified we were going to be seeing game after game after game. And then, as a lot of people predicted, Rogues slipped down the tier list a little bit, so it's now a strong, well-built deck, and that's it. So we haven't seen many of the mirrors, but I seem to remember that the quest mirror is just a race.
I mean, by design, the quests themselves, right? Like, if you come up against the same quest, there has to be something really weird to be happening where it isn't just a race to complete the quest. That's just kind of the nature as to how quests were put together. But I agree with you. I think Rogue hasn't had quite as much of an impact in this tournament as I would have expected it to. And I think one of the big reasons for that is because you have class pairings.
Yes.
It's very easy to put one of the two classes in your pairing as a deck that at least operates relatively quickly. So that if there is a rogue staring at you on the opposite side, you have that threat of an aggro deck to then shut down the rogue. And that has led to a lot of people just not picking rogue because they look over the hall and they say, oh, the guy over there looks like he's got aggro decks in his lineup. I can't play my rogue anymore. But now with the mirror match potential coming up, we are going to see some. But of course, there is still the potential of one of them being a Miracle Rogue, which is still performing very well for some players. Casey, my Complexity teammate, for example, actually top 50 on all 3 servers last month.
Sounds easy enough.
Using Miracle Rogue.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty good going.
Deck's fine.
Deck is fine. The other thing we discussed yesterday is how far Quest Rogue has come in the last 3 or 4 weeks since Dog's original attempt at it. And there are things now you can do. You've got Glacial Shard, for instance. If one player's playing that, one isn't. We may not have seen as many mirrors of the latest iteration of Rogue as we think we have.
Yeah, I was a big fan of Glacial Shard when it came out. I'll come back to that point in a second because we do have our card on Hallmark, and you need here, as you see on the screen, second highest point earner for 2016 with 42 points. I assume that is for Kazakhstan, is the missing piece of information in that.
Yeah, that sounds right because George C and RDU both got over 100.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah. But yeah, probably just sitting behind Neyman in that mark for Hallmark. But yeah, competed every prelim and 18 HCT points for Spring. You need, on the other hand, bit more of a well-known competitive history for him. Several DreamHacks, PGL Tavern Tales as well. Gamers Origin player that he represents. And wants to know that baguette du fromage is the incorrect way to try and speak French, and you should use babec avec du fromage instead. Isn't it omelette du fromage that people use when they're pretending to speak French?
I don't know.
I'm not sure
speak English.
I'm not sure that's even like the correct meme to be denying is the right meme. Like, there's a serious level of memeception going on here, and I don't think I quite follow it.
Maybe he's trying to trick us into deliberately saying it correctly.
Yeah,
no one says it at the moment.
You just heard my horrible English accent try and pronounce French words, which I'm sure none of you want to live with again.
I can't pronounce English words with my accent, so it's absolutely fine.
France versus Kazakhstan, Rogue versus Rogue. We await news on whether it is going to be the Quest Mirror or whether either or both of these teams are going to be favouring Miracle instead. And of course, as I mentioned, we very heavily expected the Quest earlier on. Both teams very heavily expected the Quest earlier on as well. You saw the mulligan process take place from that in the Warrior Mirror, but it is, in fact, going to be the Quest Mirror. There is a Shadow Step in hand for France. There is a Ferryman in hand for Kazakhstan, but you have to say advantage Shadow Step in that exchange.
Especially when they have Vanish as some sort of emergency option if needed as well as just win the game option. The power of Vanish has gone though, but they will draw that obviously shortly. Let's see Kazakhstan getting the Firefly, and obviously Elementals are one of the ways you can race very well with this if they do pick up an Igneous.
They did. They picked up Iggy in their mulligans.
Oh,
They're
okay.
actually sat with Firefly Igneous Elemental in hand already.
So they have the setup in hand. If they can kill the Igneous Elemental, what do you kill it into though in the mirror?
It's a good question. Unid, on the other hand, is favouring the Wisp version. I am actually a big fan of Wisp in this deck. It's very, very strange. When I was talking to Ixar about this quest when it first got revealed, right. He was in the Bahamas when the quest got revealed, and we talked to him about it. I asked him, "Have you tried Wisp?" He was talking back then. He was saying, "Yeah, we've tried it with Stone Tusk Boars and South Sea Deckhands, etc." I was like, "What about Wisp? Have you tried Wisp?" It's like I tried it, but I didn't. It felt like a little bit too memey. Which just disappointed me because for the longest time I've wanted there to be a broken Wisp deck. It costs 0. There must be something that makes this card broken. So I'm a big fan of using it here. It's just an automatic quest completion basically with Vanish essentially. Like if you're under pressure against a board development deck and you draw Wisp, Wisp, Vanish, yep. Turn 6, Wisp, Wisp, Vanish, Wisp, Wisp, and then next turn you can just activate the quest. You have 2 5/5s with initiative.
And it is 1 extra turn off. A lot of the time we're counting with Ferryman, and then you've got to play your 1 drop back down, and suddenly numbers don't add up, and you miss a turn.
Right.
You only get to 3 out of 4, so that makes a lot of sense to me. On the other hand, it's Wisp.
Good counterpoint. Well taken.
Counterpoint. Right. It's still Wisp.
I like it.
It's been a mystery to me since the dawn of Hearthstone that a Naught mana 1/1 can't be broken in some way.
Right, exactly. It just says 0.
In any other game, this card would probably be banned already. Okay. The Ignis is going to be hard to kill, especially as people tend not always to play even backstabs anymore. A lot of these decks are very, very all-in now.
Yeah, we saw one of the teams mulligan away a backstab from the opening hand. I think it was Kazakhstan who had it alongside the Ferryman in the opening hand. So they are going along that lines. But of course, you're just not going to backstab an Igneous Elemental unless you do it yourself.
No, your own one. That's what I mean.
Right,
there's no way of killing it in this matchup, so you need to actually kill your own ones.
Yeah.
It's one of those strange matches I think Raven was talking about where people are trying to kill their own Doomsayer.
That was me, yeah. Normally, the Wisp version is actually the version that runs Doomsayer as well, if you do go along that line. So there is possibility that you can see that Doomsayer set up just to kill your own Igneous Elemental.
And then your opponents are trying to,
kill your Doomsayer so that your Igneous lives to slow down your quest. It's a weird world that we live in now, guys. Hearthstone is doing weird and wonderful things to us.
So the Igneous Elemental is going to hit the board, which means that France do have a plan for getting these elementals from it. Even if it's over 2 or 3 turns, I guess they can still chip away at its own health.
Yep. But they are going to play their own Igneous Elemental, and now it's just going to be a race for these two teams to try and pop their Iggies, as a person not less ashamed to make terrible jokes than me might say.
I just rolled eyes. That's it. You can't see me rolling my eyes, unfortunately, at this point, but that's all I had left anymore.
I just thought of that, and now I hate myself.
That's all right. You can join the club.
All right.
Okay, France have got to find I can't cast anymore. France have got to find a way to kill off this Igneous Elemental. They're behind in the race as well because the Firefly for Kazakhstan is making a big, big difference, and they know it will make even more of a difference if something gets bounced. So they don't want to trade it into the opposing Igneous Elemental because obviously that's just helping their opponent more than it's helping themselves.
Yeah, the backstab tech that you were talking about before of backstabbing the own elemental would be useful here from either side because, you know, they could just backstab trade, get their 2 1/1s online and start pushing forward because, as we mentioned, racing to the quest. But Kazakhstan do have a little bit of extra progress on that so far because France are only on 1 with their Igneous Elemental being played, whereas Kazakhstan do have at least played that Firefly before this turn, which we see France doing now to start progressing their quest just that little bit more.
Remember that Igneous Elemental is the best card in your mulligan when you're having your starting hand for winning or for completing the quest and winning with Rogue. But it's because people only keep it if they have the Firefly to go with it.
Is it really?
Yes,
is it higher than Shadow Step?
Yeah.
Really?
It's really high. But it's only kept half the time because you only keep it if you have the Firefly already.
I will have to go look at HS
look at that,
replay and
me
study
wrong.
that.
Yeah.
Not one of the.
Turned me from 100% sure into 99% sure on that, but yeah.
Interesting. I mean, no, I'm not disputing it. I haven't looked at this this deck specifically on the Mulligan statistics yet, but that does surprise me to find out. But it wouldn't be the first thing that surprised me.
But there's been a few cards like it. There's Finger is another one where you don't always keep it, but when you do, it wins you the game. You have Innovate in your hand.
Yeah, you keep it because you have Innovate, or you keep it because the rest of your hand is already.
So yeah, Igneous Elemental is this deck's version of if you have the right starting hand, it wins you the game.
Interesting.
I think that Hearthstone's got a long way to go. A lot of players got a long way to go of learning, hey, this card wins me the game. Which situations do I need it in? Alex Strauss is another card that's higher. It's not the top by any means, but that's higher than you would imagine in those situations.
So still 1 of 4 for France at the moment, I believe. There has just been the Igneous Elemental played, and there has been the Firefly that has been rebounded back to the hand in terms of minions. So Kazakhstan do have a small advantage on the count right now, but you need, and France do have the possibility to get through a lot of stuff very quickly with the Flame Elementals now from this Igneous Elemental, as well as the Shadow Step in hand. They can get all of their work done in a very quick flourish over the next turn or two.
Right, and the Wisp that you've been harping about is going to actually help them in that situation too, because they just instantly put a 5/5 on the board. As soon as it's, they're currently a little bit behind. As soon as the quest is done, they can just flip it and go in front very, very easily. They also have the deck hand versus 0 charge minions for Kazakhstan.
And no patches as of yet. And this is one of the reasons why people started to move towards this Doomsayer, Wisp, Banish, etc. version. One of the cards that is usually left out of this deck is Swashbuckler, which originally was considered one of the best cards to really go in on.
But it's obvious you play a card that draws you loads of cards, right? You draw 4 cards from it.
Exactly, but the problem is you either just kind of get some weird spells that don't really synergize too well with what you're trying to do. It's like, do I play this 4-mana spell or do I play a 1-mana 5/5 charger? Like, which of them is going to be more effective? Or you pick up just some expensive minion from the other class.
Use that on turn 9 after the game's finished.
Just a 5/5. But the real big downside that people didn't quite realize was a downside for a while is that it summons patches. And that is actually a negative for you, because on turn 5 and after, if you haven't played your Swashbucklers because they're not in your deck, suddenly South Sea Deckhand is a 1-mana 10/10 charge.
I hope you like my invention.
That seems okay.
Seems like a balanced card, right?
I think it's good that this deck exists. I like it. You talk about balanced cards. It's good that the deck can sometimes be completely broken and sometimes just doesn't do anything, so you get to laugh at them.
Glacial Shard is another addition that I am a big fan of in the deck, though. I actually was quite excited about this card, or not necessarily excited, but thought it was going to be quite powerful when it was revealed. I actually saw it maybe as a fill-in in the 1-drop slot for Pirate Warrior, potentially, after having lost the Sir Finley Murgleton. Many people on Twitter amongst the pro community told me that this card was garbage and unplayable and would never see play. I will not claim victory, because I certainly did not see it seeing play in the way that we are seeing it in Quest Rogue, but still, it just felt like a strong enough effect in a cheap enough body that something was going to find use.
Also, I think we've got 2 years of this card, and Zoo will be played at some point.
Unlucky.
Rip. At some point, Zoo will be a deck in the next 2 years of Hearthstone.
Almost certain.
Glacial Shard will find a home in that particular deck somehow, surely.
Yeah.
Okay, just talking through while we wait for France to just decide how they're going to catch up on this board. And it looks like
that patches draw is such a big deal.
Yeah.
We joked about it, but when you actually look at the situation, it's so miserable. Because now they have to spend an extra mana on being able to clear out some of this board the next turn. They can only take care of 2 minions right now, which means the counter quest is coming down on the following turn with 4 minions still in play, and they have to spend twice as much mana to be able to charge stuff out on the following turn.
And also the Tide Hunter here for Hallmark is going to be important, because he's going to be able to generate a whole... It's not so much the charge that's going to be relevant in this at this point. It's going to be who can get a lot of stuff on the board. And being able to bounce your Tide Hunter over and over to get extra minions is going to be relevant too.
Just to note that France actually traded into a 2-power minion instead of a 1-power minion when they are all essentially 5/5s anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very, very, very unlikely to end up mattering, but who knows in the end. But there is 20 damage in play right now for Kazakhstan, so they have to decide whether they want to go resource battle or whether they just want to queue this up as a race right now. They could have just gone face and said, hey, you would need 2 charges from that spot to end the game. If not, then we are threatening lethal, but they have no follow-up damage themselves. So with Bouncers in hand, with Bilefin Tidehunter in hand, with Mimic Pod in
every
hand,
card in hand is basically 2 cards. It's ridiculous.
So they are saying, okay, we don't have the straight damage right now, but we do have resources. So let the grind fest begin, and we think we can take care of you in a grindy matchup now.
Which is incredible when you think that France had Wisp in their deck and should be able to just spam the board that little bit more quickly. But this has turned, like you say, into a grind fest. It's just going to be elementary trading, like beginner level 5/5 versus 5/5 trading. And who's got the most of those things will probably come out on top.
That's a big whiff. He'll be very pleased that he did not Mimic Pod backstab, but it's a big whiff nonetheless to be drawing it at this stage.
Okay, so board developed though for France. They're going to get first chance to start hitting people, except they're going to have to hit some taunts.
Bilefin Tidehunter, with the bounce effect, is able to put some significant walls in the way for Hallmark. But now with double Mimic Pod in hand, if this does come down to a pure battle for value, it's looking very much like Kazakhstan have the advantage, unless France's Mimic Pod hits something insane.
Just to point out, the hit to the face is kind of relevant here if they get the chance to do it at any point. 2 hits to the face will count as basically a factor of 5. So if they can sneak that in, that may become relevant, although by the look of this, it's not going to. It's going to be whoever wins this ground war between all these 5/5s.
Prep pickup, a little bit late, but can be used with the Mimic Pod here, but it's likely that even if they spent 3 mana on this Mimic Pod, they are able to spend their entire hand afterwards anyway. So it just plays around small possibilities, like 2 or 3 mana cards being picked up to allow them to develop, and oh boy, that is some damage in hand right now.
Yeah, it's going to be able to clear up some of the board and hit some in the face if they want. Interesting to see how they develop here. Are they going to keep trading to make sure they maintain their board advantage? That seems to be the logical thing.
South Sea
Or do they just want to hit for 20? South Sea Deckhand, by the way, guys.
Yeah,
I can still speak today.
You can, that's true. Continuing to play for resources, though, which might just end up biting them here because the Mimic Pod is going to punish very, very hard. They are sat with a Backstab and a Dream, and I believe Hallmark's Patches is still intact in deck, which means that is the 1-mana 10/10 charger that we spoke about earlier.
1-mana 10/10 charger. Also interesting, though, I wonder what France have put Kazakhstan on to make that line of play. There's 2 cards in Kazakhstan's hand, having played the quest that they chose not to put down last turn.
Ooh, Vanish is not pretty. There's some work that they can do with it due to the nature of having 2 charge minions in play right now where they can use it for repetitive damage, but they were looking for more board development right now because they can sense weakness on the French side with only 1 card in hand.
Yeah, they're actually seriously considering just daggering up by the look of it. Surely they play the Mimic Pod because it's going to reveal another 1-drop so many percentage of the time.
Well, it costs them 5 damage if they don't dagger up.
Exactly.
The deck can't charge, so...
Yeah. Is that relevant? I mean, it's relevant. It's a lot
Pretty
of damage.
relevant. I mean, you mentioned that this dagger has to go in at some point to break this factor of 5, so why not have it be now when you have the potential to get the 5 extra damage out of it?
But then if you don't Mimic Pod into a 1-drop, you don't get an extra 5 on the board that may do 10 in the long run.
Yeah, it's fair.
I guess with Vanish in hand, you can afford to be a bit slow with a charge on the table, though.
God, Backstab is a miserable card to have at this point in the game. So when you play Priest up against Quest Rogue and like you after turn 6, 7 after they've activated your quest, you just draw like Potion of Madness, Shadow Word Pain is your next 3 cards.
Right.
Ah, delightful. Thanks, game.
It's a hard choice because one of your massive weaknesses playing this deck is against the very aggressive deck, so Backstab's so huge. But then it's such an awful card in terms of synergy with the rest of the deck. It doesn't do anything.
That's game. By the way, that is game right there with the South Sea deckhand and Patches. 10 damage, Vanish, 10 more damage, and as you mentioned, queuing up the dagger and getting those extra 2 points in did create the factor of 5 that was needed, and Kazakhstan are on the board. Hallmark prevents the 3-0 sweep. France are going to have to work just a little bit harder for this hard-fought victory.
The comeback is on the cards here at 2-1.
Hallmark. Comeback is on the cards for Hallmark.
Sure. But people are supposed to read into that.
Nah, people are dumb.
Wow. You heard it here first, second, and third. Check the VOD for what Sottle just said.
Oh, don't do that. I'll never get away with things if you keep telling people to check the VODs.
Don't just be busy laughing at me, it's fine.
Oh, that's true.
You're good.
Yeah, all right.
Okay, so 2 games to 1 to France, still on match point, of course, but Hallmark putting Kazakhstan back in that. And a lot of the good classes have gone. We've seen Warrior and Rogue already gone here. And yeah, down to Paladin and Priest, which is a pretty good lineup here. Yippertox choosing the Priest, which is unusual at that combination.
It is. It is a touch unusual. You would expect to see in most teams' class allocations that they put Paladin in a spot where they're almost certain to pick it because it's just so flexible, just so powerful, perhaps just the strongest class in the game right now. It's probably just between that and Mage overall in terms of success rate that we're seeing. So interesting that he's choosing to go with Priest here. He probably looks across and says that he has a Priest build that he feels comfortable with against an aggressive Druid and most standard builds of Shaman. Right. If it's a Jade Druid, then maybe that's where the spanner in the works might come for picking Priest into this, because maybe Paladin just trying to get off to a quick start and leveraging Tarim and Tarim and company in the late game might just get more work done. But I think he's hoping that he's going to come up against aggro Druid here.
And flipping that slightly as well, if you're against the Shaman, the Paladin struggles quite badly sometimes. Jade Shaman in particular, it just seems to lose that resource battle on turn.
I mean, we saw in the previous series where they came up against an Elise pack without having won themselves and still had about 6 cards left to spare at the end of the game, potentially. Right. So, yeah, it can definitely be done. Talk here, that is slightly out-of-date information. We do believe that Pavel has left Armor Team just in the last couple of days, but Talk is still representing them loud and proud. Top 8 DreamHack wins 2015, as well as a Seat Story Cup performance. Guy Patox, on the other hand, very, very popular Twitch streamer, probably the least experienced competitive player on the Kazakhstan team overall, though.
Casually getting top 200 legend anyway.
Yeah, not bad.
Just like you do, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, some of these players haven't got much tournament experience, and this, again, is a fantastic opportunity for them to do so whilst getting advice from top players at the same time as being good themselves. Helps put them at ease a bit more, and we'll get some of these players from the ladder into the tournament scene.
Yeah, and it really is, you can rely on one player to really, raise the average level of your team because it is such a collaborative effort in Hearthstone Global Games. The teams are always communicating. They collaborate from moment one until the end of the series, and moment one is when you're devising your lineup, talking about strategy, scouting the opposition, putting deck lists together. All that stuff is done as a team, and then in the game itself, all four of you are communicating. Maybe there are specific roles looking out for specific things, but all four of you are having input on proceedings.
And this is going to be a silence priest. I have something else to say there, but this is a notable addition. We haven't seen much of this in the Hearthstone Global Games, at least when I've been casting and looking through previous matches.
No, I expected to see a little bit more of this because of the exposure that Tyler gave to it with I don't know what it was, like 19-hour stream straight of just
just one of his short little streams.
Yeah, just a quick outing for Tyler. One of his quick visits to Twitch, just 19 hours, just dipping a toe in the water. But he jammed an awful lot of Silence Priest and did very, very well with it. And since then, the deck has kind of exploded in popularity. And it's interesting to me because the build that has been settled on is very inflexible, much more rigid than I expected it to be. Like Tyler's list did not have any Shadow Pains, any Shadow Deaths. It was really low on ways to react or recover a board. It was just all in on draw cards, play a 4-5 or a 4-8, silence that thing, and then kill my opponent as quickly as possible.
I think one thing we're noticing in the meta at the moment is there are very few cards that deal with big things. So Meteor's kind of slow.
Yeah.
Polymorph is there, but it's awkward. It doesn't really, if it's not killing a big thing, it's almost a tech card.
Right.
If it's not killing a big thing, it's not doing anything. Mulch has gone. Hex is there, but if you're playing Hex, you're quite often using it in a deck where it's not an afterthought. It's trying to keep you alive against big minions, but it's not actually played on the early turns as much as it is in a lot of decks. So Hex is about the only thing you have to worry about. So it turns out that actually you can afford to just make a huge minion, and a lot of decks just can't get rid of it. For now.
And I mean, even beyond that, if you're playing against some other type of priest, yes, Shadow Death and Shadow Pain are fantastic removal spells for most situations, but you create a 4-5 or a 4-8 minion, you can slap 20, 40 health on it and just leave it sitting there until you draw the inner fire.
They know what you're going to do.
Yeah, they know what's going to happen, but unless they're playing copies of Silence or other things along those lines, then they just have no way to interact with it. So you're just sat there waiting for the inevitable to happen, and in the meantime, just go ahead and Faceless Shambler and have a 420 that's attacking if you really, really want to.
Time to start playing Dark Iron Dwarf.
Damn. Lorinda has broken the meta. Let's do it. Dark Iron Dwarf Priest, let's go.
What could possibly go wrong with that amazing piece of tech for one very specific matchup that might not even do it quick enough?
Yeah. I mean, you'd probably play Abusive Sergeant, right? Just to have it be cheaper.
All right. Broken already, see?
Yeah. This is what we do. You're the ideas man, I just improve
you make it work.
Perfect. Yeah.
I just have ideas, many ideas. I'm not allowed to broadcast most of them. Anyway, the game is progressing, oddly enough, whilst we're talking, and the priest got a pretty good-looking draw here.
It did. Could we see the fabled Humongous Razor Leaf, Power Word Shield, Divine Spirit combination that makes the world very happy? They're just desperately trying to figure that one out.
What's he talking about? Help me!
Desperately trying to figure that one out. Twitch chat knows. They know what's up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Thanks, Twitch chat. Feel free to tweet me and explain. The Razor Leaf. So this card is awkward. This whole deck is slightly awkward in that if you don't play it much, you end up having silences in your hand at the wrong times. I've seen a very prominent streamer in the last 24 hours sit there with a 2024 minion and
that hadn't been silenced yet. Yeah, right.
Like, I've won the game. Oh, actually, no, I just haven't.
Right. I mean, that can often be something that ends up happening because, of course, Power Word Shields you will start with anyway. If you don't have
they'd assumed they had silenced it though.
Right. Oh, okay, fair enough.
Their
But,
ordering up.
like, legitimately, it can happen because powered shields you will start with if you don't have better targets to put them on, just because you want to cycle them out of the deck anyway. And then even then, you can end up, like, Lyra cycling Divine Spirits to make that happen. And it's not the end of the world, because you can still get those stats into an attacking force by Faceless Shambling that minion.
I think Faceless Shambler is the real piece of tech that makes this deck, like, go round.
Sure.
It allows you to fumble around, messing around, playing those shields like you've just described, and then eventually just go, oh, look, this card will win the game now because I have the resources available to copy. Because most of the things just stick on the board, right?
Right.
By the way, we should note that is a Yogg Saron. That is definitely a way that Druid can deal with 2020.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the France community is, or the French community, I should say, is fairly insular in nature. They do kind of keep to themselves to a certain extent, but I do just kind of have this impression in the back of my mind, I don't know how accurate it is, that France just kind of likes Yogg. I don't know like how much of that is just put down to Tars single-handedly, but that is my perception that I have. I don't know whether it's there or not, and now we're seeing Yogg again coming out. Maybe it's more accurate than I give it credit for.
I think the card's a good card. It's still
Tell me more.
So the only situations... Druid can't deal with wide boards.
Sure.
It steamrolls you to death if it survives. The one time you need a reset, your opponent's going to have a wide board, and Yogg is at its strongest and its finest when your opponent has a wide board, because it doesn't kill itself so much. So I feel it's a card that's going to drift in and out of Druid depending on, you know, who doesn't want the tech and who does for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, one thing that I will definitely echo about that is that I don't see a way that Druid survives through all these, you know, 410 and bigger minions for the rest of this game without something dramatically ridiculous happening. And the only real ridiculous tool that Druid have at their disposal for huge minions now is pretty much Yogg Saron. Naturalize is not a card you're going to be playing too often. Mulch is gone, as you said, and Swipes and Wraths and Feral Rages just aren't really going to get
I think I prefer it more against decks that can get out of hand like Paladin, where you need a reset button. It's going to be handy in this game to give them any chance whatsoever, maybe, if they're not dead by then. But what I was referring to really is you can put it in your deck because of things like Paladin, and if it sometimes has a use against Silence Priest, so be it.
Sure.
Because again, if you do reset the board in those games, you just win with your inevitability of your huge Jades. Okay, so do they keep the Innovate and have a very small Yogg, or do they actually try and develop a board and fight off this monster?
Yeah, how big is the Yogg? We don't have the handy Arcane Giant cheat sheet anymore.
Not very is definitely the answer.
There's been a Jade Blossom played. There was a Feral Rage on the previous turn. I don't think there's a great deal more than that that's been committed. So not looking like the most promising Yogg Saron just yet.
But they've chosen not to innovate out the Jade Spirit, so their intention seems to be to just take 3 or 4 Yoggs and go for it. 3 or 4 Yogg. 3 or 4 spell Yogg. That's where I'm going, and just go for it.
Hey, if they get to take 3 or 4 Yoggs this game, they'll probably be in pretty good shape.
Meanwhile, the Priest is just sort of... This is what you were saying, like, it doesn't have much flexibility. It's currently just messing about, trying to wait until it can win the game. And it's doing a good job of that, by the way.
Silently waiting in the shadows, just biding its time until the moment where it can violently murder its opponent. And it's not far away from that right now, because look at the amount of damage that's in play. If another silence effect gets picked up, that is, what, 12 more damage getting pushed on the following turn. The 2 Watchers just patiently watching on the outskirts of the active board.
France have complete information, though, as to the potential, whether to play the Yogg, whether not to. So they can act on that now and work out what they think the odds are of dying next turn, and they can get a bigger Yogg. They can Jade Blossom, Jade Spirit, make a decent-looking board at the same time, and just take their chance for 1 more turn.
Yeah, I like the Spirit and the Blossom. It's actually relatively competitive board state just on its own. Talon Priest is getting to the point now where Inner Fire is just game-breaking. If they manage to load this up on one of the already existing minions, 4/8, for example, becoming 4/11, just threatens an 11/11 in the future. But France have done all right here with picking up a couple of timely big minions. 4/4 and 5/5 now on the Jades does allow them to do some work on fighting back on this board, maybe even without the Yogg.
Yep.
And then they can just try and be a little bit greedier, try and look for that explosive blowout Yogg Saron that they might need.
One of the weird things that happens in this matchup sometimes is you choose not to kill minions. You'd like to kill them, you're not choosing to keep them alive, but in return you just bump into the big health minions so they can't double up into those game-winning monsters.
Right.
You just keep things at a low health total, and they actually find it really hard to kill you.
Yes, it's massively important. Even if they start going all in on one minion like this with Divine Spirits, with Cabal Talon Priests, it's massively important that if you have attacks to spare, don't go face. Just send them into the minion and just lower the health, because if you stop them from activating a Divine Spirit in a fire combination, this deck doesn't really have a plan B. They have to have a Divine Spirit in a fire kind of thing happen at some point, or a big Shambler. One of those two things has to happen. So by limiting the health pool of any minions that are in play, you're playing around all of those possibilities.
And in fact, Kazakhstan have done a good job of inventing option C here, which is basically just go wide with all of this garbage and keep hitting you with it and hope you die from it.
Right.
But this does look like a really good setup for Earthen Scales into Yogg here. Probably some of the discussion is, what do we hit with our minion before we play the Yogg?
Right, it's a very good question. And yeah, how big is it really going to be? 5 spells, 6 spells, something like that after the Earthen Scales and the Innovate gets
They're just
cast?
doing the Flame Strike dance.
The Flame Strike dance.
That's all they're doing right now.
No Yogg. No Yogg, they're going to hero power. They're just going to fight for this board honestly for now.
Is Yogg a dishonest old
Yes!
god?
Of course it is! Are you kidding me?
He promises things and delivers.
I guess that's fair.
That's as honest as you can be. Okay, so you can't combo the 4/9 in one turn. As in, you need 2 cards to combo. They know the other card is coin, is where I'm going with it.
Yes, very, very likely. When there is a 4-man setup all communicating, as although these players on camera look like they're playing solo, they are communicating with their entire team. When there is a 4-man setup, very often there is one man whose job is just entirely down to just tracking which cards have been drawn, which cards are in hand, any reads that anyone has given them about particular cards in hand. So there is a very, very high chance that they are still well aware that that card is coin.
And Kazakhstan will have, on the other side of it, no idea what is in the hand of France. They won't expect a Yogg. Somebody may mention, hey, we better be careful, but you can't be careful of Yogg.
They probably know at least one card is an Innovate at this point, because just 2 cards with nothing happening in a Druid hand, it just almost always is an Innovate.
And they may feel the other card's the other Earthen Scales or something like that, because you tend to hold on to that card for Auctioneer.
Very
It's a
possible.
card that sits in your hand a long time.
Very possible.
Because there aren't many other cards it can actually be unless it's double Innovate.
Right. Oh, okay. Now we're getting some gas.
Yeah.
Now we're getting some gas in the Yogg engine. Wild Growth is still available to be played with an Innovate Yogg afterwards, and now we are moving up much, much further in the Yogg Sarong count.
But again, they feel they're safe.
Believe,
one more
yeah.
turn and just
I like
making these bigger.
I like it.
You definitely don't want to Yogg unless you have to, especially with how he behaves these days. So, yeah, this is absolutely fine.
I would say they were probably just going to wait for a turn where they just didn't have anything to do before playing Yogg, but that turn was last turn, and it just never happened.
So instantly playing the Shadow Visions there. My instinct would be to wait until you draw one of Divine Spirit and Inner Fire, and then Shadow Visions and get the other one.
Does that make sense? How does maths work, Lorinda? So if you draw, then you draw one more card. There is then less likely to still be 2 copies of Divine Spirit and Inner Fire left in the deck, which reduces your chances of then hitting them off any given Shadow Vision.
And you know what you want.
But as you said, right, if you wait until you draw one, you're then able to react and pick the specific one. Debatable.
To think about that. They did it very quickly, which was more my issue than the fact that they did it.
It's not the kind of question where if you haven't thought about it before, you can't really just sit in silence as a caster and work out everything behind it. So, yeah, it's a good point. Definitely worth thinking about.
But they seem to know that the answer wasn't to do it that way, and they seem to be doing fine as it is. Decision time now, though. This lack of flexibility you're talking about coming back to bite them because they can't afford to mess around dealing with this board.
Yep. And what good is this Inner Fire in hand if they just lose access to all of the minions that can potentially attack here, which is a very realistic possibility. If there were a Swipe or a Wrath drawn from France in this position, they could very well be kissing goodbye to their entire board. But speaking of kissing goodbye to your entire board, is it time for the undisputed king of kissing goodbye to your entire board?
Kissing goodbye to all sorts of things over the last year or so. Like championships and such like.
Too soon.
Too soon.
Savage.
Okay.
We're in a world where Yogg Saron exists and people complain about Hungrybox. Jeez.
I'm so sorry. That's talking of savage. Anyone who doesn't know what Sotto's on about, you don't want to.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so these innovators are just going to fuel the Yogg. Presumably, they're keeping the other one.
Keeping one for auctioneer,
yeah. And for anything that may end up in their hand at the end of this Yogg.
Corruption hits the only relevant target. A-Spirit hits the Yogg, but that's not going to prevent the stopping of the spells if the initial Yogg dies. They learn that there's an Inner Fire, and they're very happy about something.
But they can use it. They've got Innovate in their hand.
All right, got the Nether. They got the Nether. That's what they're happy about.
Yeah, they were a little bit lagged there on the cams, but they got the Nether. And of course, the Ancestral Spirit means that the Yogg survived. And
kisses, handshakes,
and look
celebrations, fist bumps, Divine Spirit from Kazakhstan. Just when I thought I would get away with a whole tournament without seeing a man's dreams shattered before my very eyes by Yogg Saron, he has to come out and ruin everything once again.
It's not everything that's ruined. I get to see you sad. And that always makes me happy.
Wow.
And yeah, France just coming in for a sudden, huge reversal of the situation there. And in fairness to them, you can see what happened, but they built up the Yogg, they waited. Even you can't be... Yeah. They sat there, they waited, they decided to go for far more spells than when we first talked about the possibility of playing Yogg. They calculated they could afford to go for those extra turns, and they were rewarded by Yogg thanking them for the extra spells that they cast.
Yeah, it is. It's genuinely hard to say with a straight face like, yeah, they played Yogg well, but they genuinely did. There was a couple of turns there where it really felt like it was time. They waited. They got greedy, picked up Wild Growth, 2 extra spells, picked up another Innovate, an extra spell again, and it was probably one of the last spells that was going to be cast. That was that Twisting Nether. We didn't have the exact count of how many spells it was, but they were 6 or 7 spells deep at that point anyway, and there cannot have been that many left to cast.
No, definitely not. It's that Wild Growth pickup that really did it, adding those 2 spells in one turn. And that gives France their first win of the event, and Kazakhstan take their 3rd defeat in a row. And they are now in that situation where they've not only got to win their 2 remaining matches, but they've got to then sit and hope that the rest of the group pans out nicely for them.
Yes, indeed. France, however, are now looking a little bit more rosy than Kazakhstan in their position after picking up that win. And you saw the excitement and the happiness, the high fives, the smiles, and the handshakes. As we mentioned, they're a very close-knit, tight community, the French Hearthstone community. So this will definitely feel like a big community, collaborative effort for them. And, they will have the entirety of the French Hearthstone community behind them. And I'm sure everyone is delighted with that win. Everyone is delighted with that Yogg, apart from the Kazakhstan team.
Yeah, and I think we've got a chance to go to interview one of the French team now, if not all of them. So let's see who we get on the line there.
Hey guys.
How's it going? You hear us okay?
Yeah, it's okay.
Cool.
Long time no see. How do you feel after being a superstar in our intro video? You're now back to the lowly business of actually playing Hearthstone.
Yeah, it was a really good video, and like that, everyone can see my awesome English. So I'm really proud.
Much better than my French, I'll tell you that much. So.
You seem to be not only winning, but enjoying the whole tournament. Was it a good fun to play that today, even before you knew you'd won?
Yeah, we are really happy to win this one because we are a bit stressful because there is a lot of a big community in France, and they want us to win. Yep. Sorry for my English, it's terrible.
Your English is good, it's better than mine.
Talk to me a little bit about the thought process of that Yogg at the end, because there was like 2 or 3 extra turns that you just held on, Wild Growth came out, Innovate came out. How many times did you seriously consider playing it before you actually did?
We tried to not play Yogg Saron because it's a bit greedy. Mm-hmm. But when we see the second innovation, it was totally we has no choice at this moment, so we play Yogg Saron, and it was a good Yogg Saron. It was a correct Yogg Saron, I think. Because I see that he has Inner Fire in his hand,
yes,
and it was loose for us. So yeah, this was a good Yogg Saron.
Yeah, they drew Divine Spirit on the next turn.
Oh,
as well.
Okay. Oh my God.
Yeah,
nice.
Life's sense of humor caught up with Kazakhstan very quickly there as they got wrecked by a Yogg and then drew the Divine Spirit Inner Fire they'd been looking for the entire game.
Bad luck.
Thanks a lot then, Talk. Congratulations and see you in future weeks, I'm sure.
No problem, guys. Bye.
Take it back. Yeah, a happy man indeed, winning for himself, winning for the community of France as well. So.
Yeah, and again, I'm always glad when a player echoes something that we say, because we do have to function on a certain amount of theorizing and guesswork. But when I say that the French community was really behind them, and then Talk comes out and echoes the same thing, you can hear just how much the French community is really into their native community figures, streamers, pro players, YouTube content creators, everything in the book, and they've got them all represented in all the many colors of the rainbow on their team.
Yeah, very much. Just looking through these highlights now, that Mana Worm doing more work than expected. But that game was in the books pretty early, I think, this one, with the Alex Straza.
Yeah, and speaking of in the books, that Swamp King Dread got deep in that book right there. 1-1 hit the board, got immediately murdered, but it was all in good fun from Diz Demon as he had the Firelands Portal or the Pyroblast for lethal anyway, and it was looking like a procession for France at that point, but then a very, very close Quest Rogue Mirror.
Surprisingly interesting Quest Rogue Mirror.
I actually, I don't find Quest Rogue, boring or frustrating to watch or anything. I find it a very interesting deck. I find it a very intricate deck to try and learn more about and play and get better at. I just don't like it. I just want it to go away.
Can I liken it to Patron for you?
No, banned. That topic of conversation is banned.
Everybody should get in touch with Sottle and tell him how the intricacies of Rogue are just like the intricacies of Patron.
Thanks, buddy.
It's his favourite subject.
Everyone should get in contact with Lorinda and talk about the way he says warrior.
Cheers.
Yeah. And this was the game.
Wow, it's war here on the deck.
Right down to the wire. Using one Innovate here to pull out the Yogg-Saron. They held on to the second one in case of any useful spells that they could follow up with that got generated, as well as holding on to it for auctioneer purposes. And you can see the slight delay between what France were looking at and what we were looking at. As they celebrated preemptively, we had no idea what was going on. But the combination of that ancestral spirit alongside the Twisting Nether was enough to just generate an irreversibly powerful board state.
Yeah, and take you down 3-1 again. Kazakhstan now deep in trouble. They're going to have to make sure they win those last two. And heart goes out to Neyman a little bit, because he's been doing a lot of hard work in Hearthstone still and not quite getting those results from time to time at the moment.
I think he'll be all right, though.
I think he'll do fine.
Verts Pro showing up in Trinity Series, his HCT and World Championship performances. Neyman is here for the long run in Hearthstone. He'll be just fine. But it looks like Kazakhstan as a whole still have a bit of work to do as a Hearthstone nation. As you mentioned, they are now, I believe, 0-3 in the group.
0-3 in the group, as we see here. Canada and Malaysia at the top of this one. Malaysia looking very, very good after 2 matches.
Not quite as good as Canada, though. As I mentioned, the only team to have played more than 1 match is with a perfect record at this point, the clean 6-0. But France, importantly in the context of the game that we've just seen, got themselves right back into contention, pulled themselves kicking and screaming back into the middle of the pack now with a 1-1 record.
Middle of the pack is where you need to be, with 3 from each group going through to the next stage of this event. And yeah, we've got plenty more Hearthstone for you coming up, so we're just going to take a moment to set up the next match, and we'll see you in about 2 or 3 minutes.
We're almost there. Quiet down, everyone. This is not like any of our previous expeditions. This will be far more ambitious. We're stepping into a land of primordial wonder. Infused with astonishing elemental energies. The plant life here holds very unusual properties. So don't touch anything. And while you may be excited to see the local fauna, you might want to make sure they don't see you. Because their powers of adaptation are devastating. Make no mistake, we will be tested at every turn. But if we stay on our guard, we might just survive. Now then, are you ready? Then let's journey into Ongoro Crater.